Well, hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks for stopping in at the Red Barn. In this episode, we're back on the LS car, and I'm actually going to start it off with a public service announcement about animal rescue. I hope you choose to watch that, but if not, you can skip ahead to the chapter on drivetrain prep if you want to get right to the car stuff. And yeah, you may have noticed there in the background, we dragged the last of the 914 parts cars up out of the field, so here's another donor vehicle that'll help other 914s live on. But let's go ahead and get back on the LS car. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate your comments and suggestions, so keep those coming, and let's get to it. An out of nowhere rainy day at the Red Barn. Oh, and before we go in, actually, what started off as a storage building because of all the extra junk and parts I have has turned into something else completely. You saw my earlier video, if you've been following the builds, about my wife volunteering at a cat rescue. And so we're going to go in here and we're going to say hi to my wife, and we're going to introduce you.
Welcome to the kitty casita.
This is the kitty casita, and this is Julep. This is Mama Julep. We call her Juju. She is a sweet, sweet, sweet little thing. But almost impossibly sweeter are the happy hour crew. So Julep is actually Mint Julep. Oh, look at her. She's such a good girl. Hello. Hi there. Hi, Papa. Hi. And so over here, the happy hour crew.
The little gray one is Hot Toddy.
That's Hot Toddy right there being scratched.
And oh, here comes Mama.
Whenever they make noise, Mom comes running in. And the big boy right there.
Which one?
This guy.
One? This is Whiskey Smash.
That's Whiskey Smash. Smash for short. The other red boy is
Punch.
Punch, like spiked punch. And the little tortie in the back
is Vesper.
So there's Mint Julep and the happy hour crew. And look at this little boy. Oh my goodness, their eyes are just starting to open. Their ears are still curled down, but they're coming right around. Look at the little kitty cats. Oh, look at that face. Look at that face. Oh my goodness. So anyway, there you go. A little bit not non-automotive, but important stuff.
Support your local rescue.
Yes, say that again.
Support your local rescue.
Support your local rescue. Let's get back to the cars. Well, that's always fun to do by yourself, but got it done. And I figured while it's out, maybe give you a quick overview of a couple things you can't see when you're when the engine's in the car. One of the things that a couple people have said that have seen it is, hey, how does this thing even run? Because it doesn't look like, you know, there's enough wiring on the car. So here's just a real quick overview of what I did. I mean, obviously the injector wiring, you know, you're kind of stuck with that, but I did my best to hide it. But then usually there's coil packs on top of the valve covers. And what I did is I just made a couple of coil brackets that live down here for this side. Here's the Misc electric water pump. So, this is a standard Renegade Hybrids engine crossbar, but because the drivetrain's been moved forward 1.5 inches, this boss is usually sitting forward here, and so that was sliced off and moved back, and there's a gusset that's been added here. Here's we'll look at the California Motorsports billet side plate on the Boxster Trans. And then this is a reasonably highly modified Renegade hybrid mount. This main chunk is essentially what their mount comes with, but then obviously we had to change it to accommodate the fact that the mounting structure in the chassis is completely different than the stock 914. Same deal on this side. Little bit different setup on the coil brackets. One goes against the motor mount, one's on a set of nutserts that have been added to the crossbar. And same thing here, right? This gusset's been added as well. And then the turbo forward headers turned around backwards. Not much to look at up here. Just these are from Misc swivel water block mounts, really narrow because I wanted as much clearance up here as I could get. But there it is. It's ready to go back in. And we'll have this thing back on the road here in no time. If you recall from the last episode, I was all excited about this solenoid-controlled heater control valve. And in all my excitement, I think the motor was still in the car, but I forgot to sort of pay attention to where it might fit best. What's going on here is in this area of the engine, you know, the firewall is like right here. The main wiring harness comes through this area right here. And so I don't want to take the risk of mounting this thing and turning it into some kind of problem later on, like right when I go to put the motor in. So I'm chickening out for right now. And all I'm doing is I'm running the pre-thermostat, right? This would be where you get heat before the thermostat opens, hot water. And I'm just running it right back into the inlet for the water pump. So I'm just doing a bypass for right now. And so my cheap out is, like I said, I just zip tied it here to make sure it avoids the pulley. And we should be all set, at least to get the car running. And then I'll deal with this once the motor's back in the car. So apologies for that. But as you've heard me say a bunch lately, the best laid plans. I need to pay more attention and plan my modifications a little better. But it's great to have the LS back in the shop. It's been sitting in the regular garage for a while. And here's kind of another shot that helps people understand. When they see that motor in the car, they say, how'd you fit that giant motor in the 914? Well, granted, I've got rid of the sheet metal from the back and all that, but when you look at what's going on between the trailing arms and how much room you have, there's a gigantic engine compartment here. So we're getting there. I got to get the car up in the air and get the jack contraption with the motor and trans on it under there. And just a couple hours and we should have this thing back on the road. So Martin called me this morning and he said, hey, what motivation do you need? How can I help? And he forced me to put my engine in today. So thank you. The other thing that happened was, you might not have caught it in the time lapse, but the back end of the car has never gone up high enough. And Martin says, well, why don't you go ahead and just put 2 of those blocks in there? And I said, that's not going to get the ass end high enough. There's no way. And that shows you what I know.
Rake me, baby.
Rake me. It worked. It totally worked. And I normally wrestle this in by myself, but this was a million times easier. And now, with that little secret, I now know I can get the motor in and out with this setup. But for today, LS motor back in the car, wiring to hook up, axles to hook up, a few other things. But that's, a couple more hours, and this thing will be back on the road. And it's that guy. It's him. It's him. Officer, it wasn't my fault. Martin made me do it.
Happy to help.
So yeah, the car's getting back together. Yay. Thank you again, Martin. Take a bow.
See it in one piece.
Exactly. Thank you. Well, that's the kind of the shot there on the not quite completed sheeting of the wiring. This gives you a look at it from kind of like the general view though, with that guard in place. Footrest in place. That's what you get with that's the ECU cover that matches it. And yeah, obviously some work to do. Got, like I say, got some wiring to tidy up. But the stuff that's done, I'm pretty happy with. It's been sitting a while, as you can see from the dust on all the surfaces, and embarrassingly some cobwebs. But we'll get that all tidied up and have it running here in the next little while. And I need to change out this axle. I have a potential problem with it. So I want to pull it out. And these are the late model Carrera axles you'll see here in just one second. Okay, Porsche Geek Tech Fest. So, in the last episode, you remember I was talking stub axles and standard CVs. Now, this is not the, well, let me see. Yeah, no, this isn't the axle this came off of. This still has its roll pins, but you get the idea. CV, stub axle, bolts on, right? Fasteners run through the holes. So this is I'll call this an earlier 911 axle. This is what I've got in the LS car with the Boxster trans. Forget these boots being different. These are aftermarket boots that provide a little bit more flexibility. But here you can see when this goes through, this is that spacer that I was mentioning before that you have to run. This is necessary to run on a Lake Carrera axle when you run the setup that I've got. And then, not that anybody cares, but when you run a Boxster trans, there's this 1/2-inch spacer that needs to go on the inner CV because of the length of the axle, 914 Boxster trans, and so that's a kit part. I think I got those from Renegade, but it's just a 1/2-inch spacer between the CV and the output flange on the trans. But there is a Lake Carrera axle, and, you know, again, all built-in CV joint, no stub that comes off. So there you go. That is Lake Carrera axle, 911 pre-Carrera. How exciting. And something else that's important, again, you may stumble on this and it may not matter to you at all, but you can see that when these sorts of axles come out, the stub stays in the hub. And as you know from seeing what I just pulled out, this wheel, while still attached, then the hub is still attached, there's no axle and there's no pinching force, there's no compression between, you know, holding that bearing. So this wheel, I can move this thing around a little bit. And you do not want to put your car on the ground. You don't want to put any weight on the car when it does not have an axle through the hub securing that bearing, because you can damage the bearing. And so if you're saying, well, wait a second, this car has been on the ground, the Ferrari car has been on the ground with no axles in it, and that's because, yes, if I take you down there, I don't know if you can see, there's stub axles, right? So another little tech geek thing for today. But you can see why I was a little concerned about where this thing was going to mount, because not only right below that water junction, that where the thermostat is, you can see the main wiring harness coming through, but there's also the shifter cables. There's some other electronic stuff coming down there. You can see down there on the floor still is the water line that runs to the front of the car. So yeah, I'm glad I chickened out on trying to mount that heater control valve, at least for now. So we'll work this out later. So that's point number one. Then, one of the things that happens with this drivetrain going in and out is this is the clutch slave cylinder, and I take it off the trans when I pull the drivetrain out just so I don't have to bleed the system. You know, it's just one last thing to do. And of course, I go to put it in, which is it's not too fiddly. It goes in, and I'm not going to try to do this again. I'll just tell you that when I went to put it in, I had to force the piston all the way into the cylinder before I could get it to go into the trans. Now I just happen to have another Boxster trans sitting here, and you can see what happens with this slave cylinder, right? Nothing rocket science-y about it, but what it does is it hits, that plunger hits this section of the arm, it pivots down here, and then there's the throw-out bearing. And near as I can tell, I have to push that thing so far or so hard in there to get it to clear so it can be mounted, that I suspect what happens is that when I was juggling, if you go back to the very beginning of the video, when I was juggling the transmission on there, until the throw-out bearing hits the pressure plate, you can see that this arm can kind of flap flop around, and I'm wondering if what I did was, look how easy this unclips. Boop. That throw-up bearing is held in by these two little, just barely little plastic clips right here. And I suspect that what might have happened is something like what you're seeing here now is the throw-up bearing might have come off that little clip mount and is causing everything to be pushed too far, causing this arm to be pushed too far back that way, which means when I go to put the slave cylinder in, I'm really having to cram it in there, so something ain't right. That is a very long way around to today's disappointment is I got to pull the transmission off the engine and make for certain sure that there's nothing going wrong in how that throw-out bearing is sitting in there. So, you probably heard a couple, 3 times in the video, oh yeah, just a couple hours more we'll have this thing on the road. At least I'm consistent, because a couple hours more we'll have this thing on the road. But it ain't gonna happen today, because it's a giant pain to try to pull the trans out by itself. I gotta sling the motor up, attach it to some of the support structure. It's just, argh. It's always something. But as I say, whenever anything goes wrong with these builds, it ends up just being another story about the car. You know, 6 months from now, this won't matter. So I try to keep a good attitude about this sort of a thing, but it is a little disappointing because I would really like to get this car back running. It's a beautiful day. It's driving season. All the Cars and Coffee events are happening. There's other events that I want to go to. And arg, like I said, arg. But such is life. So that is going to do it for this episode. Didn't get quite as far as I thought. It's still an epically cool car. And it'll be on the road soon, and we won't have to worry about something going horribly wrong, because the last thing I want to do is fire up that motor, push in the clutch, and have something get completely ripped apart. But there you go. So, as always, I really appreciate you guys watching. Comments and questions, subscribe if you haven't, and we'll catch up with you all real soon. Everybody take care now. Bye-bye.